What's going on? This is Kex Next, and today we're going to be looking at creating some grass inside of Element 3D in After Effects. Now, I admit this might not be the most exciting tutorial in the world, but I feel like it has some uses in when you're doing some visual effects, or maybe when you're doing some 3D animation, it can help with that. But let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be creating. So I have this shot right here of some grass with a nice depth of field, a little bit of fog in the background, and some subsurface scattering, which is like the main thing in the shot. It really helps to make this grass look more realistic. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at creating today. So to get started, let's go ahead and create a new composition, and we'll call this grass 1 and hit OK. And we're going to right click, go to New and Solid, and we're going to call this E3D and hit Enter. And now we want to apply Element. So go to the Effect Controls, right click, go down to Video Copilot, and select Element. And we can just go ahead and go to the Scene Setup. And when we're in here, we can turn off Draft Textures, and we want to import our models. And what's cool about this tutorial is that all of our models are already in Element. They came with the program. It's in the starter pack. So we can go ahead and visit the starter pack and select the grass patch, and we get this. And the first thing we want to do is normalize the size, so it's a little bit bigger. And you know, the material looks fine on this thing, but not great. So to fix that, we can go into the grass patch, into the materials, go to grass, go to subsurface scattering and enable it. And you know, you can notice nothing really changed right there, but if you go to the lighting presets and turn it to SSS, you can see what it's doing. It's allowing light to pass through the material and hit the other faces of the model, which is really cool. So we might want to turn up the intensity to 2, so it's double what it was, and then turn the scattering amount down, so it's less faded. Right there is pretty good. And then maybe we could turn the absorption amount down a little bit. So right there looks pretty good. And then we can actually go back to the single lighting preset, just so we can view our model without having the computer lag. So the next thing we want to do is change the environment. So if you go to presets, go to the environment, and then turn on our environment, you can see it's in this black and white kind of box, and that doesn't look very good. We want it to look very outdoorsy. So if we go to the basic 2K environments, which are the environments that come with Element, we can go to basic 2K15, which has this really large sky, kind of sunsetty look, but it looks really nice on our model. And you can really see the difference. A lot more contrast in there. Looks pretty good. And then we can go to the environment settings, maybe turn the brightness up just a little bit, and then also the contrast. And hit OK. That looks pretty nice. So now we want to start duplicating our model. So if we go to the group folder, go to the group symmetry, and turn on X and Z, it'll duplicate our model along the X and Z axes. And to, you know, move our model around, we can go to the grass patch model and just move it. And you can kind of see now that we have these 2 or 3 other duplicates of our original model. And then to duplicate it one more time, we can click New Folder, drag it out of our group folder, and take this group folder and move it into the new one. And now, if we go to the new one and turn on the group symmetry for X and Z, and then we can go to the original one to move it, we'll have this huge just field of grass, which is exactly what we want. Alright, so that looks pretty nice. And when we're done here, we can just go ahead and hit OK. And we want to create a camera that makes it look like, you know, it's like a macro shot, so we can kind of see this grass up close. So go ahead and right click, hit New, Camera, and we want to change the preset to 135 millimeters. So pretty big lens, and it'll allow us to get that macro shot, that macro feel. And make sure it's 2 node, and hit OK. And then we can hit C on the keyboard to bring up the camera options. And we're just going to kind of find a good spot in the grass. So rotate it a little bit, zoom in a lot. Really just find a nice looking spot in the grass. So right there is pretty good. And obviously it doesn't look really good right now. So we can right click down here. Actually, hold on, let me just rotate this camera a little bit more. There we go. Alright, so we can right click down here and hit New, Light. And we want to make sure this is a spotlight. And we want to change the color to a more yellowish orange around here. And maybe make it a little bit more light. There we go. And make sure that the intensity is on 200. The cone angle is around 80. And cast shadows is on. And hit OK. And already we can see some stuff. Not great stuff, but we can see some stuff. And so to change, where this light is in our scene, we can go ahead and hit Active Camera and go to Front View. And we want to rotate this light. So first we want to zoom out so we can kind of see what we're doing. And then we can hit P on the keyboard to bring up the light's position. And we'll just move it around. And this light is actually rotating around a center anchor point, which is great for us because it's not moving the whole light, it's just rotating it. So you just kind of want to find a nice place, maybe rotate it so it's towards the grass out there, and then make it higher in the sky because we want to have that kind of high noon feel. Maybe not noon, between noon and sunset, or morning and noon, whichever one you're going for, but about right there. It's pretty good. And then we can go back to the active camera. And this is pretty bright. So we can go to E3D, our E3D layer. And we just want to mess around with the render settings. So first we can go to the physical environment and turn the gamma up to about 5.4. Add a little bit of contrast into our scene and some vibrance. And maybe turn the exposure down just a bit. And then the lighting influence up to 75%. Maybe actually leave the exposure at 1. It's fine. Then we go to the lighting and turn the light fall off to 0.5. Add some darkness in our scene. Then we go to the shadows and enable them and turn on ray traced shadows, which will make our scene a lot more laggy, a lot harder on our computer, but the shadows look better. So that's kind of what we want. And if you want, you can change the resolution to half, and then also E3D to preview. So you can kind of see what's going on. The next thing we want to do is mess with the subsurface scattering. So maybe turn the intensity, I don't know, maybe up just a tad. So maybe like 110. You just want to make sure the intensity is turned up a little bit. And then you can turn the scattering down. So maybe about at 70%. That's pretty good. And then you can turn the light color tint up so it's a little bit more yellow, a little bit more orangish. There we go. And already this is super bright. So we can do a couple of things. One, maybe turn the light intensity down to like 175. That'll dim our scene a little bit. And then go to E3D and we'll just keep on going down. So ambient occlusion, enable it, and turn the intensity to 3.5. And this will add some of those little shadows in between the grass blade. Here, if you turn the color to red, you can kind of see what it's doing. Everything that's red is what ambient occlusion is adding into our scene. So that's what it's doing. Just adding those little shadows all over the place. Maybe go to the... Close that, and then go to the fog and enable it. Turn the opacity down to 25%. And then the color to this burnt orange color. Somewhere in here. Maybe a little bit more yellow. And hit OK. And then we can actually turn the fog start distance up. And then the range down to about 1200. And then turn the distance up. So that looks pretty good. Maybe close the fog up and go to the output. and go to the multipass mixer, and then you can turn the diffuse down just a tad. It just kind of darkens our scene down. And then you can maybe turn the specular up. And then the SSS, this just controls the amount of subsurface scattering in our scene. So if you turn it up, you're going to see more of it. I don't know, maybe like 1.05. It's just a tad little bit more. But once we have all that, we want to add some depth of field. So go to our camera, hit AA on the keyboard, so A twice, and turn on depth of field. And then you want to move the focus distance closer. So not right in front of the camera, because you want to blur out the very foreground, the immediate foreground, but you want it somewhere in the middle. And maybe turn the aperture up. Maybe a little bit more, so like 100 and, let's say, 60. There we go. That looks pretty nice. Maybe actually turn the focus distance down just a bit. A little bit closer. Yeah. Alright, so that looks pretty nice, and that's, we're almost done right there. We're pretty close to it. Maybe actually turn the light intensity back up to 200%. And we'll see what that looks like. And then if you go to E3D, go to the subsurface scattering, really just play around in here and find something that you think looks good. So just play around. If you turn it down, it'll look a lot more contrasty, have a lot more shadows in the grass. And if you turn it up, it'll be a lot more faded, a lot less of it. I mean, it'll be more subsurface scattering, but it'll be more faded into the shadows and a lot more bright. So I want it as a midpoint somewhere in there, so like 50% might be fine. And then, of course, you can mess with the absorption amount. Absorption might be good if you're working in like the sunset version of this scene, but other than that, I wouldn't go for it. Fall off is the fall off of the subsurface scattering, so you can have less fade into the ground or not. Really, it's all up to you, but I think this looks pretty good. Maybe turn the scattering up back to like 70%. There we go. But this looks awesome. I think we did a pretty good job. Another couple of things we can do to this scene is right click, go to new, and then add an adjustment layer and put that above everything else. And right click, go to color correction and curves. And maybe you can darken the scene just a tad, maybe add some contrast in there. Just a tad bit, and then mess with the highlights. And then you can also mess with some of the colors in the scene. So maybe take the reds and bring it up for more of a yellow grass. Or green. If you bring it down, you'll have this kind of like red, fiery look. Which, that's kind of cool if you want to like stylize it, but we're going for realism, so if you bring the blue curve up, it'll just mess with the fog in the scene, so kind of see it back there. So maybe like a little bit of blue. Yeah. Maybe darken the scene just a little bit more. And you can also add a levels adjustment and color correction and then levels. And play around in here. So if you just want to mess with like the darkness of the scene or something like that, you can go to levels. Saturation and contrast and all this kind of stuff. So I think this looks pretty good. So once you're done with all this, you can go to the resolution, turn it back to full, go to E3D and make sure render mode is on full render, and just give it a second. And it takes a little while because of the amount of subsurface scattering and depth of field that we've added into our scene. And this just looks awesome. I love this effect. It looks really great when you're done with it. And, one more thing that I will leave you with is that there is an alpha channel in the back behind the scene. And if you don't want this alpha channel, there's a very easy, simple fix. So, to fix this, you can go to Composition, and then save frame as a file, and then just save this image right here to your desktop and bring it back into your project. I've gone ahead and done that, so if you just take your PNG image from your project and just drop it into your scene below Element 3D, you still have the alpha channel, except there's a little bit more, discoloration there. So if you solo this layer hit Q on the keyboard to bring up your masks and go to make sure it's on rectangular mask, and then just draw a mask across this scene. So really close to the alpha, but not in the alpha. And make sure that it's in the blurry depth of field part. So right there. And then we're going to hit P on the keyboard to bring up the position and move it up on the Y axis. And then if we unsolo the layer, you no longer have an alpha channel, which is perfect. And you can do all sorts of stuff with this. You maybe make it your desktop wallpaper. You can do some visual effects work with it, so make it like a macro shot and then have some other video above it, or do some 3D animation, have a character step in this grass or something like that. There's a million and one uses for something like this, so really just go out and play with this effect. If you like this video, please leave a like and leave a comment down below telling me if you want to see anything in a later video. If you dislike this video, please leave a comment and tell me why you disliked it. Maybe I'll fix it in a later video. But other than that, I am Kex Next, and I will see you next time.